The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Episode 4. Narrated by Wormhole Podcast. Chapter 6. So, one morning, an ambitious young reporter from New York showed up at Gatsby's door. He looked eager and curious. He asked Gatsby if he had anything to say. Gatsby, being polite, responded, "Anything to say about what?" The reporter fumbled for words. He had heard Gatsby's name floating around his office, but he didn't really know why he was there. After 5 minutes of awkward conversation, it became clear. Gatsby had become something of a legend. Over the summer, Gatsby's parties had turned him into a figure of fascination. Everyone had a story about him. Some said he had an underground pipeline to Canada. Others spun tales that he didn't even live in a house, but in a moving boat disguised as one. It was wild. But what drove James Gatz, who was really Gatsby, was harder to understand. He had changed his name at 17, right when he set his sights on a bigger life. The moment came when he saw Dan Cody's yacht sail into a flat part of Lake Superior. Back then, James was just a kid in a torn green jersey. But he borrowed a rowboat and rowed out to Cody, warning him that a storm could break up his yacht. I think Gatz had that new name ready for a long time. His parents were poor and didn't have much ambition, and he never really accepted them as his family. J. Gatsby, who we know now, was the creation of his dreams. He saw himself as a son of God, destined for something grand. For over a year, Gatsby worked hard along the Lake Superior shore, digging clams, catching salmon, whatever it took to survive. He had a strong, sun-kissed body from all that labor. He had known women early, and the attention spoiled him. He grew contemptuous of them, thinking they were either naive or overly dramatic. But inside, his heart was like a storm. His mind was filled with wild dreams. Each night, he would weave these fantasies until sleep overcame him. Those dreams hinted at a reality he longed for, a world built on glitter and beauty. At one point, he even tried going to college at St. Olaf in Minnesota. But he found it dull and couldn't stand the janitor work he had to do to pay for it. So he drifted back to the lake, still searching for his future when Cody's yacht finally arrived. Cody, a man in his 50s, was a product of the silver rush and wild adventures. But he was also vulnerable to the many women who sought his wealth. Ella Kay, a newspaper woman, was known to manipulate him, steering him away from his money. When Gatsby first met Cody, he was mesmerized by the yacht. It represented everything glamorous and beautiful to him. Cody saw Gatsby's spark and took him under his wing, buying him nice clothes and bringing him along on adventures. For 5 years, Gatsby served Cody in various roles: steward, mate, even jailer, all while they sailed around the world. But it all ended when Cody died unexpectedly, leaving Gatsby with nothing. Gatsby had been supposed to inherit $25,000, but it all went to Ella Kay, and Gatsby was left empty-handed. Gatsby shared this story with me later, wanting to clear up the wild rumors about his past. I took note because it was a confusing time for me. Everything I thought I knew about him felt like a jumble. For a while, I didn't see Gatsby or hear from him. I was busy in New York with Jordan, trying to win her over. Then, one Sunday, I decided to visit Gatsby again. Almost immediately, Tom Buchanan showed up for a drink. I was startled. It felt like an inevitable collision. Tom rode up with a man named Sloan and a woman in brown riding clothes. "I'm delighted to see you," Gatsby said, standing on his porch. "I'm glad you dropped in." But I could see he was trying hard to impress them. He offered them drinks, but they didn't want anything. Gatsby was nervous, trying to keep the conversation alive. "Did you have a nice ride?" he asked. Tom barely engaged, just nodding along. Gatsby turned to Tom, probably thinking they had met before. "I believe we've met somewhere before, Mr. Buchanan." Tom grumbled and tried to remember. "Oh, yes, I remember very well. About 2 weeks ago." Gatsby pressed on. "I know your wife." Tom turned to me, confused. "You live near here, Nick?" "Next door," I replied. Gatsby asked if they'd stay for supper, but Tom and his crew had other plans. They started to leave, and Gatsby's disappointment was palpable. Later, Tom came over to Gatsby's party with Daisy. I noticed a heaviness in the air that night. It felt different. Daisy's voice was soft and excited. "These things excite me so," she whispered. "If you want to kiss me any time during the evening, Nick, just let me know." Gatsby pointed out the famous guests, but Tom just looked annoyed, saying he didn't know anyone there. Daisy marveled at the celebrities, but Tom was dismissive. He didn't want to be a part of it. Daisy danced with Gatsby. I was surprised by how graceful he was. But soon, Tom interrupted, saying he was going to eat with some other people. As the night wore on, Daisy's enthusiasm faded. I sensed she felt out of place. I noticed the party had turned sour, filled with drunken chaos and loud voices. It was overwhelming. At the table, conversations felt dull, and Daisy tried to lighten the mood, but it didn't work. She looked around and commented on how people forced their way in. The night wore on, and I saw Gatsby waiting for Daisy to return from her chat with Tom. He looked anxious, almost desperate. "Did she like it?" he asked, his voice heavy with hope. "Of course she did," I said, trying to reassure him. But Gatsby insisted she didn't like it. He felt distant from her, like a wall had formed between them. Gatsby wanted Daisy to go to Tom and say, "I never loved you." He believed he could make everything right again. But I warned, "You can't repeat the past." He looked at me, wide-eyed. "Can't repeat the past? Of course you can." He started pacing, lost in thought. Gatsby wanted to recover something, some essence of himself that he felt he'd lost. He remembered a moment from 5 years ago, where he felt a spark with Daisy under the moonlight. He longed for that feeling again. He wanted to climb back to that moment, where everything felt perfect. Gatsby's struggle was clear. He believed if he could just return to that place in time, he could recreate the magic. So he vowed to fix it all, to make everything just like it had been before. And in that moment, I understood his desperate hope. But I also felt the weight of the reality that loomed ahead. Chapter 7. Sure, here's the adapted Chapter 7 of The Great Gatsby, written in a conversational style with emotion tags for an engaging audiobook narration. So, it was during a time when everyone was super curious about Gatsby that something strange happened. One Saturday night, the lights in his house didn't come on. Just like that, his amazing parties were over. I began to notice that cars pulled into his driveway, but only stayed for a minute before leaving, looking kind of sulky. I wondered if Gatsby was sick, so I decided to check on him. When I got there, an unfamiliar butler with a suspicious face greeted me. "Is Mr. Gatsby sick?" I asked. He replied, "Nope." After a pause, he grudgingly added, "Sir." "Tell him Mr. Carroway came over," I insisted. "Who?" he shot back rudely. "Carroway," I repeated. "Carroway. All right, I'll tell him." Then he abruptly slammed the door in my face. I learned later that Gatsby had fired all his servants the week before. He replaced them with a handful of others who didn't go into West Egg Village to socialize. They just ordered supplies by phone. The grocery boy said the kitchen looked like a pigsty, and people around town thought these new folks weren't servants at all. The next day, Gatsby called me. "Going away?" I asked casually. "No, old sport. I hear you fired all your servants," I said. I wanted someone who wouldn't gossip. Daisy comes over often, in the afternoons. So, Gatsby's whole world had crumbled because of Daisy's disapproval. They're just some people Wolfsheim wanted to help. They're all related and used to run a small hotel, he explained. "I see," I said, trying to understand. He invited me to lunch at Daisy's house the next day. Daisy sounded relieved when I confirmed I was coming. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that a big scene was brewing, especially with the heavy atmosphere Gatsby described in the garden. The next day was scorching hot, probably the warmest day of the summer. As my train finally emerged into sunlight, I could hear only the hot whistles of the National Biscuit Company. Inside the car, the seats were almost too hot to sit on. The woman next to me was sweating, and then she dropped her pocketbook, gasping, "Oh my!" I picked it up, holding it out gingerly to show I had no bad intentions, but everyone nearby, including her, eyed me suspiciously. "Hot," the conductor said, almost cheerfully. "Is it hot enough for you?" As I arrived at the Buchanan's house, a faint wind carried the ringing of the telephone out to Gatsby and me. "The master's body!" the butler bellowed into the phone. "I'm sorry, madam, but it's too hot to touch this noon." What he really meant was, "Yes, yes, I'll see." He came over, sweaty, taking our straw hats. "Madam expects you in the salon," he exclaimed. In the cool, dark room, I found Daisy and Jordan sprawled on a huge couch, looking like silver idols in their white dresses. "We can't move," they said together, almost in unison. Jordan's fingers brushed mine softly before I inquired, "And Mr. Thomas Buchanan, the athlete?" Just then, I heard Tom's gruff voice coming from the hall phone. Gatsby stood in the middle of the carpet, looking around with fascination. Daisy laughed at something he said, her sweet laugh rising in the warm air. "The rumor is," Jordan whispered, "that's Tom's girl on the phone." We fell silent as Tom's voice rose, filled with annoyance. "Very well then, I won't sell you the car at all. I'm under no obligations to you." "Holding down the receiver," Daisy said cynically. "No, he's not," I assured her. "It's a bona fide deal. I happen to know about it." Tom stormed into the room, his big body blocking the doorway. "Mr. Gatsby," he said, extending his hand with concealed dislike. "I'm glad to see you, sir. Nick?" "Make us a cold drink," Daisy ordered. As Tom left the room, she went over to Gatsby and pulled his face down to kiss him on the mouth. "You know I love you," she murmured. Jordan teased, "You forget there's a lady present." Daisy looked around, unsure. "You kiss Nick, too." "What a low, vulgar girl," Jordan said, laughing. "I don't care," Daisy exclaimed, dancing on the fireplace. Then she remembered the heat and guiltily sat back down. Just then, a freshly laundered nurse entered, leading a little girl. "Blessed precious," the nurse crooned, arms outstretched. "Come to your own mother that loves you." The child rushed into Daisy's dress, and they both seemed to glow. "Do you think they're pretty?" Daisy asked Gatsby, pointing to her friends. "Where's Daddy?" the child asked. "She doesn't look like her father," Daisy explained. "She looks like me." After a moment, the nurse pulled the child away, and just as Tom returned with 4 gin rickeys clinking with ice. "They certainly look cool," Gatsby observed, his tension evident. We drank nervously. "I read somewhere that the sun's getting hotter every year," Tom said casually, trying to lighten the mood. Daisy, on the verge of tears, said, "But it's so hot, and everything's so confused. Let's all go to town." Tom, dismissive, chatted about cars, while Daisy insisted, "Who wants to go to town?" Gatsby's eyes floated towards her. "Ah," she cried, "you look so cool." Their eyes locked, and they seemed to forget the rest of us. "I always look so cool," she repeated, her passion clear. Tom looked astounded. "You resemble the advertisement of the man," she added innocently. "All right," Tom snapped. "I'm perfectly willing to go to town. Come on, we're all going." He got up, eyes flashing between Gatsby and Daisy. No one moved. "Come on," his temper cracked. "What's the matter anyhow?" Daisy's voice broke the silence. "Aren't we going to let anyone smoke a cigarette first?" "Everyone smoked all through lunch," Tom replied impatiently. "Oh, let's have fun," she begged. "It's too hot to fuss." Tom didn't answer, and Daisy sighed. "Have it your own way," she said. "Come on, Jordan." They went upstairs to get ready, while we men shuffled our feet on the hot gravel. "You got your stables here?" Gatsby asked Tom. "About a quarter of a mile down the road." "Oh." A pause hung in the air. "I don't see the idea of going to town," Tom burst out angrily. "Women get these notions in their heads." Daisy's voice called from above. "I'll get some whiskey," Tom replied, heading inside. Gatsby turned to me, rigid. "I can't say anything in his house, old sport." "Her voice is full of money," Gatsby suddenly said. That was it. I finally understood. Tom came back carrying whiskey, followed by Daisy and Jordan in their metallic hats. "Shall we all go in my car?" Gatsby suggested, touching the hot leather seat. "Is it standard shift?" Tom demanded. "Yes." "Take my coupe and let me drive your car to town," Tom insisted. Gatsby found the suggestion distasteful. "I don't think there's much gas," he objected. "Plenty of gas," Tom said boisterously. "If it runs out, I can stop at a drugstore." A pause followed this odd comment, and Daisy's frown deepened. "Come on, Daisy," Tom said, pressing her toward Gatsby's car. "I'll take you." She slipped away from his grasp. "You take Nick and Jordan. We'll follow you." She walked close to Gatsby, lightly touching his coat, sending a wave of tension through the air. Tom, Jordan, and I got into Gatsby's car. As we sped off into the heat, Tom asked, "Did you see that?" "See what?" I replied, confused. He looked at me keenly, realizing we must have known all along. "You think I'm dumb, don't you?" he suggested. "Maybe I am, but I have a kind of second sight that tells me what to do. I've made a small investigation of this fellow," he continued, as the tension in the car grew. "I could have gone deeper." "Do you mean you've been to a medium?" Jordan asked, teasing him. "What? A medium?" he replied, confused. "No, I haven't. I said I'd been making a small investigation of his past." "And you found he was an Oxford man," Jordan added helpfully. "An Oxford man?" Tom was incredulous. "Like hell he is. He wears a pink suit." "Nevertheless, he's an Oxford man," she insisted. "Oxford, New Mexico," Tom snorted contemptuously. "Listen, Tom, if you're such a snob, why did you invite him to lunch?" Jordan asked, exasperated. "Daisy invited him," Tom shot back. "She knew him before we were married." We drove in silence, tension rising. As we neared Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's faded eyes, I remembered Gatsby's warning about gasoline. "We've got enough to get us to town," said Tom. "But there's a garage right here," Jordan objected. "I don't want to get stalled in this baking heat." Tom slammed on the brakes, sliding to a stop at Wilson's garage. "Let's have some gas," he barked. "I'm sick," Wilson replied, looking pale. "I've been sick all day." "Well, shall I help myself?" Tom demanded, irritated. With effort, Wilson left the shade and unscrewed the cap of the tank. "I didn't mean to interrupt your lunch," he said weakly. He needed money badly and wanted to leave town with Myrtle. Tom was startled. "Your wife does?" he exclaimed. She's been talking about it for years. I'm going to get her away." When Tom heard this, he just wanted to get on with things. "What do I owe you?" he asked, sounding annoyed. "I want to get away," Wilson repeated, looking green. Tom snapped, "I'll let you have that car. I'll send it over tomorrow." Just then, I felt like something was off. Over the ash heaps, the giant eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg watched us. And then I noticed Myrtle peering down at us from a window. Her expression was full of jealousy and fear, but it seemed directed not at Tom, but at Jordan, who she mistook for Tom's wife. Tom was feeling panicked. His wife and mistress were slipping from his control. He pressed the gas pedal, speeding away toward Astoria. As we drove, Jordan suggested, "Those big movies around 50th Street are cool. I love New York in summer." Tom, irritated by the word sensuous, turned to Gatsby. "Have you got your stables here?" he asked. "About a quarter of a mile down the road," Gatsby replied casually. A brief pause hung in the air. "I don't see the idea of going to town," Tom snapped again. Then Daisy called from an upper window, "Shall we take anything to drink?" "I'll get some whiskey," Tom replied. Gatsby turned rigidly to me. "I can't say anything in his house, old sport." "Her voice is full of money," Gatsby suddenly said, and that hit me. Tom returned, and we all decided to head to the Plaza Hotel. The room was stifling, and we joked about taking cold baths to cool off. But soon the argument shifted, and the atmosphere turned serious. "By the way, Mr. Gatsby," Tom said sharply, "I understand you're an Oxford man." "Not exactly," Gatsby replied, looking uncomfortable. Tom pressed, "So, when did you go there?" Gatsby claimed he went for 5 months in 1919, but Tom wasn't convinced. "Oxford, New Mexico?" he scoffed. Tensions escalated as Tom accused Gatsby of being a fraud. "I reckon you're a bootlegger," Tom said with a sneer. Gatsby's expression changed to one of fury and disbelief. "I want to speak to Daisy alone," he insisted urgently. But Tom wasn't having it. "What's been going on? I want to hear it all." "I told you what's been going on," Gatsby snapped. "For 5 years, and you didn't know." Tom turned to Daisy, shocked. "You've been seeing this fellow for 5 years?" "No," Gatsby corrected. "We couldn't meet, but we've loved each other all this time." Tom was furious. "You're crazy," he exclaimed. "She loves me now." Daisy's expression changed, and she hesitated. "I never loved him," she finally said, almost reluctantly. Tom's face twisted in disbelief. "Oh, that's all?" "Daisy, tell him the truth," Gatsby urged. But Daisy was confused. "Even alone, I can't say I never loved Tom." Tom seized the moment. "Of course it matters. I'm going to take better care of you now." "Daisy's leaving you," Gatsby insisted, his panic rising. Tom laughed scornfully. "She's not leaving me." "I am, though," Daisy finally said, struggling. "Why's that?" Tom asked, his voice mocking. "Daisy's leaving you," Gatsby repeated, more urgent now. Tom's anger boiled over. "You're a common swindler." The argument raged on, and I felt the tension suffocating. "Please, let's just go home," Daisy pleaded, her voice trembling. "Your wife doesn't love you," Gatsby shouted, and the room fell silent. "Do you hear me?" Gatsby pressed. "She loves me." Tom's face turned cold. "You're revolting," Daisy said suddenly, looking at Gatsby with disdain. Meanwhile, the music from below floated in, a reminder of the world outside. The argument continued, Gatsby refusing to back down, while Daisy seemed lost in the chaos. "Please don't," she cried to Gatsby, her voice shaking. "I can't stand this anymore." Tom's eyes narrowed. I want to know what Mr. Gatsby has to tell me." But Gatsby just stared at Daisy, his hope dimming. "You two start on home, Daisy," Tom ordered, "in Mr. Gatsby's car." Daisy looked alarmed, but Tom insisted. "Go on. I think he realizes it's over." They left, disappearing into the night, like shadows on the wall. Tom wrapped up the whiskey bottle and muttered, "Want any of this stuff? Nick? Jordan?" I didn't respond. "Nick?" he asked again. "What?" I replied. "Want any?" "No, I remembered that today's my birthday." I was 30. Tom drove us back, talking incessantly, almost triumphantly, but his voice felt distant. The reality of 30 loomed ahead, promising a decade of loneliness. But there was Jordan beside me. As we crossed the dark bridge, her face fell against my shoulder, and I felt a strange comfort wash over me. So we drove on, through the twilight, moving toward an uncertain future. The story shifted now, as we followed Michaelis, the Greek coffee shop owner. He was the main witness in the inquest. He had slept through the day until about 5 when he went to check on George Wilson. George was pale and shaking, refusing to take a break. "I've got my wife locked up," he said, "and we're moving away." Michaelis was stunned. He'd known George for years, and this wasn't his usual demeanor. As they spoke, a loud commotion broke out above them. "I heard my wife scream," George said. "She's been nagging me." Just then, Myrtle burst out into the dusk, waving her hands. Before Michaelis could react, a car sped by, and Myrtle's life was tragically taken. It didn't stop. It just disappeared into the night. Michaelis was uncertain about the car color, but it was the death car, as the newspapers would later call it. George stood in shock, his eyes wide. He knew. "Oh my God," he cried out, his voice echoing in the still night. Tom, unaware of the chaos he was leaving behind, drove us back to the Buchanan's house. "Daisy's home," he said. As we got out, he turned to me and frowned. "I ought to have dropped you off in West Egg. There's nothing we can do tonight." So we walked across the moonlit gravel toward the porch, discussing everything that had happened. Yet my instincts told me otherwise. As I walked down the drive to wait for a taxi, Gatsby emerged from the shadows. "What are you doing?" I asked, surprised. "Just standing here, old sport." That seemed despicable. "Did you see any trouble on the road?" he asked urgently. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Was she killed?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I confirmed. He hesitated briefly. "I told Daisy I thought so. It's better that the shock comes all at once." He spoke as if Daisy's reaction was the only thing that mattered. "I got to West Egg by a side road," he continued. "I don't think anyone saw us." I disliked him by this point and didn't feel the need to tell him he was wrong. "Who was the woman?" he inquired. "Her name was Wilson. Her husband owns the garage." Then Gatsby revealed the shocking truth. "Was Daisy driving?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "Of course I'll say I was," he added, his face grim. When they left New York, Daisy was nervous. She thought it would steady her to drive, he explained. But then, as they passed a car, the woman rushed out. "I felt the shock. It must have killed her instantly," he said, wincing at the thought. "That's awful," I muttered, feeling sick. Daisy stepped on it, and I tried to stop, but I pulled on the emergency brake. Then she fell over into my lap. "She'll be fine tomorrow," he said, almost reassuringly. "I'm just going to wait here and see if George tries to bother her," he added. "Don't you think you should leave?" I asked, worried about his safety. "I'll wait here, maybe all night." As I walked away, I felt a mix of dread and uncertainty. Gatsby stood there, watching over nothing, and I left him in the moonlight. Feel free to adjust any tags or phrasing as needed to fit the desired tone and style.